Hola a todos. I am Ana Sofia Velasquez, current sophomore from Puerto Rico. And I would like to welcome all of you to our conversation with Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. When I learned I would be introducing Justice Sotomayor today, I'll be completely honest, I started to tear up with excitement. A million thoughts raced through my mind as to what I could say once I was on stage, but one question kept popping up. How lucky are we all to be here today? I still find it hard to believe that the author of the first book I ever read for college would visit Brown. I remember getting the packet with My Beloved World and thinking, wow, what a coincidence that my first college assignment ever is on a Puerto Rican woman. This has to be a good sign. Rest assured, it definitely was. Justice Sotomayor's memoir taught me and my class of 2020 peers not only about how challenging the next 4 years would be, because even before getting to Brown, I already had to skip the beach to read, but also how college is much more than just reading textbooks and doing homework. What many of us have learned is that college is actually about meeting people from diverse backgrounds and acceptance. It's about recognizing that your passions may change and that sometimes you just have to let your curiosity take charge. And it's about questioning your assumptions, even if it means defying standards. The college experience, although short, is crucial in determining what direction we will choose in life. And thankfully, it is also a time when, though we may not make the best decisions, we still have incredible opportunities that open doors for our future. Justice Sotomayor introduced us to what we would experience at Brown and gave us insights into how to succeed in college, professionally, emotionally, and socially. And for that, I will always be grateful to have skipped a beach day to read and prepare for the new environment I would soon call my home. Having her book as our first reading encouraged me to go to college with an open mind, ready to overcome any struggle that came my way so I could achieve my goals, and so I could beat the odds as Justice Sotomayor did. Being part of an underrepresented group gave Justice Sotomayor motivation to thrive, and this offered reassurance that my college experience would guide me to be a determined woman who, alongside other underrepresented individuals in this room, could shape an educational pathway to success. On a more personal level, I relate to Justice Sotomayor in that we are both Boricuas, as Puerto Ricans refer to themselves. I understand how difficult it is to keep being Boricua when you are so far from home, something so many of you from other countries can also appreciate. Even though at times she felt out of place, she continued to own her identity and be proud of her roots. Justice Sotomayor inspires us to remember where we came from, how this shapes us, and that despite the distance, your identity will always be a part of you. This inspired me to work with the Puerto Rican Association here at Brown, in hopes of creating a community that educates others about what it means to actually be Puerto Rican, or as sometimes my family would tell me, sharing a special spark that shines even during the longest winter day. Finally, for Justice Sotomayor, thoughts of her abuelita, her grandmother, kept her going through the toughest times, especially when she felt out of place during her student and professional life, a feeling I think we can all relate to. This past weekend, I also lost my abuelita, which makes me even prouder to be here introducing Justice Sotomayor. I know that our abuelitas would want us to keep striving for greatness. I hope that all of us will understand what Justice Sotomayor has learned, that with determination, hard work, and that special spark within each and every one of us, anything can be accomplished, and that we, all of us in this room, are all the future abuelitas and abuelitos the world will be looking up to. I'm very grateful for Brown for arranging the opportunity to hear from such an inspiring woman, and I'm sure that all of us are looking forward to today's conversation. I would like to thank President Paxson for making Brown a special place where we can all find our special spark. Welcome, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Gracias.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
The grandmother would have been so proud of you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Madam President, that may be one of the most moving introductions I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah. And having somebody from the class of 2020, having somebody who shares your background in the same way, really, thank you, Anna Sofia. That was marvelous.
That was truly remarkable. Thank you.
So I believe that the selection of My Beloved World for the class of 2020 summer reading was just an inspired choice. Not just for them, but
Your
for...
Dean of College, Maud, says that was her recommendation.
It was
so
her
we have her to
recommendation,
thank.
so she agrees. And the committee that helped chose it did a fantastic job. And the thing about the summer reading is that it extends just beyond the students. So many of us, faculty and administrators, will lead the first seminars. So students come in and we talk about the book. And I just remember your book as being a marvelous jumping off point for brand new college students, and it was wonderful. So this book and your visit has now forged this indelible connection between Brown and between you, and we're very grateful for it.
So am I.
Good.
So thank you.
So let me tell everybody how we will organize this event. I get the president's prerogative to start with 2 or 3 questions, maybe 4, depending. And then we have students who have submitted questions that have been pre-selected, and we will move to questions from those students in the audience. So let's get started. It was great for me to go back and refresh my memory looking at the book again. And I thought maybe you could start by talking a little bit about your early life. We know that you experienced hardships of poverty and the early death of your father and diabetes at a very young age. And the question is, how has this affected you? Has it given you a sense of proportion, a sense of resilience as you've moved into your life? And how do you think about why it molded you in one way, whereas other people wouldn't have been as successful at rising to the challenges?
I describe in the book the moment shortly after I was diagnosed with diabetes. I was playing in my aunt's home with my cousins, and my sugars dropped. And when my sugars drop, I lose energy, and I have to sit down and take some sugared product of some sort. Back then it was orange juice. For a period of time it was milk. Now it's sugar cubes. It really just has to be something that replenishes my sugar. And I was fuming because my mom made me sit past the point I thought I was okay. And I was really angry at her. But then I noticed my cousin sitting next to me. Her arm had been broken during her delivery, and it basically never grew. It was not functioning at all. And her parents were very protective of her. And I was looking at her and I was realizing that she never joined us in play. But I would get out of my jail very shortly. And just at that moment, I realized that as sorry as I felt for myself with my condition and that I was taking and giving myself shots, etc., that there was always something worse. That someone would be dealing with something that was more serious and more life-impacting than my condition. And I truly believe that that moment is what guided me to looking at my life as a whole, which is despite my challenges, and there were many, even to this day, I hear people's stories, because so many people so wonderfully, having read my book, will write to me and tell me stories that make the hair on my back stand up from the challenges they faced and overcame. That sense of proportionality, of understanding that burdens are burdens, that you can be angry about them at moments, that they do impose limitations, that there are things that are unjust. All of those feelings are legitimate, and I don't deny that people should have them, but I think you need that sense of proportionality to remember that no matter how hard things are, they're harder for other people. And if you stick to it, you can find ways around them. You know, I tell people all the time, you're going to meet brick walls all your life. You're going to hit your head against that wall often. So you have a choice. You can keep hitting your head. Maybe it'll break. Likely not. Or you can figure out a way around it. I've always figured out I like my head a lot. I'm going to walk around it.
And how is, as a justice, the sense of proportionality and keeping things in perspective is very important as a judge, as an attorney?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that point was reinforced for me, different story. I don't think it was in my book. One of my friends who had read the book and knew more about my life, believe it or not, I have friends who know more, read the book and came back and said, I bet there's another story in the things you cut. And she was right. As the book developed, the initial draft was much longer than it turned out to be because everybody had to put their 2 cents in as to what I should keep or not. But one story I don't think I told in the book involved a judge who was known to be a little cantankerous on the bench. He was never easy on any lawyers. But I felt that he picked on me more than anybody else. It was really a challenge to go through the night with him when I was in night court with him, or even in day court. And there were a lot of stories as to what might have caused his disagreeable personality. I'm trying to be kind, okay? But one evening, we had a lull, and at some point I got my courage up and I went up to him and I said, Judge, why are you so mean to me? What have I ever done to you? And he looked at me and he said, you are so talented. This is misdemeanor court. This is the really not serious crimes. But you take every case as if it was the most serious. What are you going to do when you move up to felony crimes, where those crimes are really horrific and the consequences are terrible? Don't you have any sense of proportionality? You have to look at these crimes as failures in human dynamics. They're the low-level crimes. You have to treat them that way. And you have to treat them with some sense of compassion and some sense of looking at them in light of what could be, which could be a lot worse. He actually changed my performance as a lawyer. And I think my performance as a judge. Mm-hmm. Because I actually had to hear, and I did hear, what he said, and I realized he was right. That we have to judge with some sense of proportion, with some sense of the vagrancy and the wideness of human behavior. When I say wideness, there's one crime, but it could be committed in a dozen different ways. And some are more culpable than others. And you have to measure punishment and your response accordingly. And so, yes, I think both my condition and my life learning have given me, I don't want to say I'm wise, but it's given me a measure of wisdom about keeping proportion in mind.
Thank you. So I want to turn to a part of the book that I loved, and I think the students coming to college really loved, which was your experience applying to, getting into, and attending college. And the one thing I will say is, you did talk about going up to visit Harvard from New York. You didn't stop in Providence.
You're right. And I have to say, I tell people as they read my story, do not follow my example, all right? I made the most unwise choice I could have. How's that?
Okay, very good, very good. But there is, there's a serious side here, which is some of the stories that you told about being in college as a first-generation student. Some of them you presented in a very humorous way, and others in a more serious way. At the time, I think there was very little recognition by universities that kind of the first generation students, these were a group you actually had to think about. And we've made a lot of strides. Yeah, we've made strides at Brown, Penn, other universities are really thinking hard. And I guess, a little bit about your experience and what advice you can give us about doing better by our first gen students.
I think I start with an understanding, which there have been some writers, critics of my book who say, there's an awful lot of gee whiz moments in that book. What they don't realize is that it was a gee whiz moment for me. Almost my entire life, everything I encountered, I had no reference point for. Linda Greenhouse, who's a famed Supreme Court journalist, she's now a professor at Yale Law School after she stopped working full-time as a journalist, was a member of the Phi Beta Kappa, and I think she's been president of the organization recently. But she wrote a speech in which she was talking about reading my book and being shocked that a college student wouldn't know what Phi Beta Kappa was. And she said that it gave her an insight that she had not really fully appreciated, which is, if you don't come from a background that can explain the markers of life, the markers of success, then you don't really know how to aspire to success. And that's absolutely true. I wish that my college counselor, the one that I took my course offerings to, had actually talked to me and said, why are you taking these classes? What do you think they will bring to you? What do you think you're missing that they will help inform you about? But he didn't do that. He just looked at them and said, they look fine. And I took the classes I did. Now, they turned out to be inspired because I had enough of a sense of my own limitations not to have jumped into advanced courses before I was ready. But many of my minority classmates with whom I was friends had taken advanced courses in schools that really had not prepared them for college. And they struggled. Some of them ended up having to drop the course midstream and suffer the consequences of doing that. I think having informed advisors who can actually sit and look at where a student comes from, what the quality of their school may or may not have been. And I don't mean track them into easy courses, but talk to them about where their needs may be and what areas they may not have been exposed to. And I think that would be a start. The second is, somebody has to tell you about what the markers of success are. What's a good grade? You're a first-generation student. You don't really have, from grammar school and high school that A's are highly sought after, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to start with in college. And sort of explaining the sort of that marker of success. Talking to you about the student activities, and there's so many of them. My gosh, I look at your day where they bring all the student organizations in. I wonder how you manage that room. You know, how do you know what you're going to like? How do you know what might make a difference in terms of the quality of your existence at this university? Which organizations are more open, which are a little bit less open, which require a skill set that you may or may not possess? Even that, I think, would be useful for a first-generation student. I'm thinking that for non-first-generation students, some of them are saying to themselves, maybe I could use that. You know, some idea of maybe you shouldn't join 6 clubs your first semester. You know, maybe you should concentrate on studying your first semester. And maybe do 2 or 3 things and try to do 2 or 3 things that are different. As you're approaching your major, what classes should you start with before you commit? Somebody should be guiding you on that. What's the hardest class in that major? And are you prepared for it, or will you be prepared for it? There's so many things about the college experience, including, you know, there were speakers at college that I had no idea were important. I didn't have a world reference to know that a David Cameron was someone that you should take the time to come to listen to. And so you need people, advisors, who are sensitive to those issues, who can tell kids like I was and still am. You know, I have passions like dance. I have friends who send me emails or call me up and say, you should see this. First, because I don't have the time to follow it anymore.
Yeah.
But secondly, that's not my strength. And so I have to rely on others to guide my choices and to educate me on what's the new thing that's valuable to see. But these are the small but so critical things. You know, don't miss your dorm party. It seems logical, but if you don't know, you might just miss it.
Yeah.
And so that is what, if I was a, you know, magic fairy.
You would, and you're talking about advising that actually rises to the level of mentoring. Right?
Exactly. And look, for a Spanish-speaking student, my book describes my process of learning how to write English. For most second language students, writing is a continuous challenge. And to have a mentor, a professor who undertakes to guide first generation, any student who's not writing well, to point it out to them and to help guide them in improving that process is a lifelong gift that you can't measure the return of. There is no profession you enter, including medicine, where writing is unimportant. Even in medicine, the most respected doctors, the ones who rise in administrative positions, the ones that people listen to and whose advice they consider, are the doctors who are writing their thoughts and persuading you of their insights. And so it's a skill set that I think college really has to focus in on.
Yeah. So let's turn to another skill set that I think a lot about and that you address in your book, which is you talk about the importance of listening strategically and really working with people openly to find win-win outcomes. And, you know, we know that we live in a very polarized time, and it seems like there maybe isn't as much strategic listening going on as we might hope. So do you have advice or thoughts on how we restore this in universities and large, more in society at large?
It's not an easy thing to do, especially in our polarized world of today. But I think that colleges can play a very important role in what was described last night, I think it was by you and Maude, where you say transparent processes. decision-making that is both transparent and inclusive, and which explains itself vis-a-vis the competing interests that exist, and explains why the choices were made, and at what cost. Because there's no life choices that come as a free ride. There is nothing in life that doesn't come with a price that someone pays. And it's sometimes you, sometimes it's the other person, but you have to recognize that price. You have to acknowledge it. Much easier to swallow when people know that you've recognized what they are giving up for you than when someone says, I'm doing X, and there's no recognition that X hurts anybody, or a diminution of the hurt in some way. But I do think colleges can do that if in all of their decision making, I'm not just talking about administrative, but faculty choices, department choices, all of it, if it is an inclusive process where people are actually forced to listen to each other and forced to speak in ways that recognize, I think you pick up the habit. You know, I didn't start teaching till I was a judge. It was because I didn't ever think I would be a good teacher. I did things in a way that I thought were just natural, instinctual, and I just couldn't figure out how I would ever explain to somebody why I did something. It wasn't until I started thinking about teaching, and I had a lawyer who invited me to go teach with him, that I started to watch what he was doing. And I realized that it was much better than my instincts. Every time a student performed an exercise, the first thing he did was talk about all the good things of that exercise. And then, and only then, did he segue into how to make those good things better by discussing the things that needed improvement. Mm-hmm. And I've realized, that's a teaching technique. I could learn that. And I started to learn it, and I think I became a much better teacher. Uh-huh. So is strategic thinking. Yeah. If you can show people how to do it, and you sort of let them build it into their system, they can do it too.
Thank you. So I have one more question before we turn it over to the studio.
Now, can I talk to the students?
You can, but what I would love you to do is just say a little bit, sorry, a little bit about, you're writing another book.
She's good. I'm in the midst of 3 books right now, okay?
Yeah.
One of them is a middle school book, which is an abridged version of My Beloved World. I think the title is The Beloved World of Sonia Sotomayor, okay? But it really is a condensed version. One of my friends who's been working with me on it said, we're dumbing down My Beloved World. And kids are smarter than this. I said, okay, that's all right. They'll pick the one they want to read, okay? The second 2 books, that one will come out in September. The second is a picture book. And it's filled with some very rich illustrations by a Puerto Rican artist who has captured my life and Puerto Rico and my life in the States in such an engaging and gorgeous way. All of the second readers, Puerto Rican and not, have loved the illustrations. But it's called Turning Pages, The Life of Sonia Sotomayor. And it's about my life told through the influence of words, books, and documents. And so each vignette, I can tell you, the first one starts with my grandmother reciting poetry. And I describe the joy of my family and the beauty of poetry through that picture. Further down is a picture of me learning how to give myself insulin shots after my diagnosis of diabetes. And I refer to comic books and to the superheroes in them who gave me the courage to give myself insulin shots. So that's the sort of theme of the book, and its purpose is to encourage young people to understand the power of words and the power of books. I really fear that with game playing today, and I love game playing, by the way, I'm not immune, that sometimes kids aren't just physically picking up books and just enjoying the process of reading. So I wanted to get to that. And the third book is coming out, I think, the following December. The third book I don't have a title for yet. The working title is Just Ask. It's a book that I came to the publisher with. They approached me about doing a children's book and a middle school book, but I told them I would only do those two if they did a third for me. And the third book, working title, Just Ask, it'll probably change because some readers don't like it, has to do with kids who have different conditions. Kids like me who will grow up with things like diabetes, blindness, deafness, in wheelchairs, with attention deficit, autism, dyslexia, Tourette's syndrome. I have something like 12 or 13 special conditions. It's set in a garden, and I talk about the beauty of gardens. And what makes them beautiful is that everything in the garden, from the trees to the leaves, to the flowers, to the plants, to the grass, that every one of them is different. And every one of them contributes something different to make the whole beautiful. And so I use that imagery throughout the book to show how people with different conditions actually contribute positively to the world. And so the book sort of themes are, the Just Ask is, if you see someone doing something different, just ask them why. Let them tell you why. Don't just look at them and wonder. And the second is, appreciate that difference doesn't make you lesser. And it doesn't just make you special. It just makes you contribute in a very different way. But it's still positive. So anyway, those are the projects I'm involved in right now.
Yeah.
Or at least the books, anyway.
And I don't know how you have time to do that, but let's move on.
I don't know either. I don't sleep.
So we have students, and
All
if
right.
you want to walk.
Okay.
So
you're going to look around
Yeah.
the audience.
We have 8 students. The first is Evan Coleman, and maybe you can stand up and say where you're from. Evan, yes.
Where's Evan? I'm blind here.
Hi.
You're all the way down there.
Over here.
All right, guys. You see all the security people around here? They're here to protect me from me. They don't like I go walk around. But all those people in the back, all they see is a little speck up there. And it's not fair to them. So I walk around. I also think it keeps you more engaged because you follow me. And it gives me a chance so that it's Nick, right? Is Nick still here? So that Nick can take pictures of me in the crowd, and you get some pictures of yourself, okay? So, Nick, we're going to start with a picture of the 2 young people in front who jumped up when I came out. And I want you to show everybody your T-shirts. Hello, how are you? Show everybody what you're wearing. Squad goals, a picture of me, Justice Ginsburg, and Justice Kagan. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. Thanks for bringing them on. All right. Now, tell me the name of the young man again.
Evan Coleman.
Hello, Evan. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
What year are you in?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior. Where are you going next?
Hopefully graduate school.
Okay. In what area?
Physics.
Wow. I've met so many nerds in this visit. I love it. I love it. Go ahead. Ask me your question.
Sure. So nowadays, in political discourse, we often see that two sides of debate can't agree on a body of facts to argue about. However, the Supreme Court has to rule in alignment with the Constitution, Federalist Papers, prior rulings, all of that. Have you, in your time on the bench, encountered a debate which was nevertheless plagued by these dual realities that we see in civilian life? And do you have any suggestions for how an everyday American citizen can fight for truth in an era of misinformation?
All right. If you put that down and we take a picture, but you want to take this off. All right. Okay. Gives me a second to think, okay?
Yes, of course.
Hello. Even on the court, if you read our decisions, what you will find is that we all start, both the majority and the dissent or concurrence, with a guiding principle. That's the legal standard that we think governs the issue. We then have to order the facts in a way that supports that guiding principle, because facts do lead to conclusions. There is, in every legal decision-making, a toolkit of interpretive tools. You mentioned some of them. There are the words, there's the history of those words. Some call it legislative history. Some people don't like legislative history. Some people think it's important, and there's a whole big argument about that. There's precedent. What have the cases said before? There are other tools about the context of the words and what does the full picture of the statute show you. I could go on and on. One of my colleagues, Nino Scalia, wrote a book where there's about 830 different statutory tools. So imagine that. You come to a conclusion because you have to prioritize, a word we used earlier, which tools you think are the most important to guide this outcome. And then you're lining up your facts in accordance with those tools. And they reach a conclusion. But the point is that you have to understand the framework to understand the importance of the facts. And once you do that, you understand what each justice is trying to safeguard. What is important to that justice in terms of constitutional principles come out in that priority of the tools they're using. And the same thing happens when people are having arguments. When you think that they're sort of different facts, they're often not different facts. They're different sides of what's important to that person. And if you don't listen to what that guiding principle is, what is it that's so important to them? Once you can understand that, that's the beginning of compromise. That's the beginning of serious conversation. That's where you can say, this is important to you, that's important to her, and where in the middle could we come out? But so many people start fighting about the facts and the importance of the facts as opposed to the importance of the principles that are motivating the discussion. You got to get back to that before you can get to sort of arguing about facts. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. That's really what I'm talking about, which is try to understand what's motivating this approach. You can actually reach compromise. Sometimes you can't on the Supreme Court. When it's big, big constitutional issues, there are really big, big differences in how justices view the guiding principles. And because of that, that's why we end up with dissenting from one another, because we have a different view of what's important to protect. So, the next person?
Sergey Torres? Where is he? Right there.
All right.
Great.
I didn't hear your name, so you're going to have to say
It's
it.
Sergey Torres.
Sergey.
All right.
I'm a senior studying English, and my question is, given
Gosh, there's somebody studying something normal. Come on in. Ask me your question, and then we'll take the picture.
given the Supreme Court's use of precedent and case law when reaching a decision, how do you think the U.S. courts will react to cases that deal with completely new technology or revolutionary ideas and concepts that have not yet been argued?
Okay. Why don't you take your tag off? Carefully and slowly. There's a great criticism by the scientific and intellectual community about the decision-making of the Supreme Court in this area. There's a reason. It moves faster than the law does. Developments in computer science and technology, it can move at lightning speed. We don't. You know, every issue that comes to us has to go through the lower courts. It has to perk up to the Supreme Court over time. We are very contemplative and we ponder a lot. We're careful about what we're doing because we're afraid that we can stifle competition or that we can stifle innovation. And so we're walking always the finest of lines. Most scholars criticize us for doing that. They want us to take more extreme, I don't want to call them extreme, that's value laden, okay? They want us to move a little faster and further than the court will. But virtually every case in this area that we handle, we try working slowly and incrementally. And I just explained the reason why. We do have to be careful. We are the worst agent to decide those issues. Really, issues of technology and innovation and science and how far they should go or not go, what should be permitted or not permitted, really should be a legislative process. Because the legislature can then balance those interests in a way that we're not capable of doing. That's not our function as justices. We're announcing law, but we're not balancing competing interests. And what we come out with is often worse than a legislative solution.
Thank you. Then the next question is Emilio Picayo, class of 20. Where's Emilio?
Hi, my name is Emilio.
I'm still lost. Where?
Over here.
All the way over there. Good. Hello, you guys. How are you? I'm coming around this way. You can ask your question. I'll get to you.
Okay, cool. So my question's a multi-part question.
I'll
I'll
have to remember.
Okay. I was wondering, how has being...
Come closer to the mic so I can hear you better.
Sorry. Hi. How has being the first Latina justice in the history of the court affected how you've made decisions and how you're treated on the court? And has it been challenging to bring the Latina perspective to the court?
What's a Latina perspective? I'm not being difficult.
Are you asking me?
No. You know, we're just like everybody else. Yeah, we are. Latinos come from every economic background. We're different genders. We are of different religions. There's Latinos from, dozens and dozens of countries with our own music, our own poetry, our own food, even our own vocabulary, you know. I remember the first month I was at Princeton sitting with a bunch of people from different parts of Latin America and even the United States. And we were going through the words for different things that were different in our cultures. And they were laughing at some of my words, I was laughing at some of their words. There's no one perspective. And there's no one perspective in the country regarding any group. What you got is Sonia Sotomayor. What Sonia Sotomayor is not just a Latina. She is a New York Rican, Catholic, raised by a single mom with an annoying younger brother. Pardons in education, Catholic mostly, educated in Ivy League, former prosecutor, former corporate defendant of Fortune 500 companies. I know rich people, I know poor people, I know middle income people. I am an amalgam of every one of my life experiences. They make Sonia. And Sonia, in any decision making, I can't pick out one piece of me and tell you that uniquely affected this decision in this way. Because it's just not possible. In one situation, I will react in law to certain things as having more priority as others. That's a conglomerate of my experience as a district court judge, a circuit court judge, and as a person, and my understanding of the world. You know, justices have different understandings of the world, also based on their experience with it. So you take the First Amendment, okay? Everybody believes in the First Amendment. We do. Every one of us wants to protect it. But some justices believe at the very core of their essence that unrestricted speech in virtually every circumstance, commercial or non-commercial, should be fostered. There are other justices who believe that First Amendment rights are a balance between the speaker, the person who's hearing it, the forum that wants to host the speech, and that all those competing interests have to be balanced to foster First Amendment rights, not just for the speaker, but for everybody. And so we don't permit you to scream fire in a crowded theater. Why? Because society wants to protect mayhem in the theater. And so you can't do that. You could be upset and say the fire is, politics in Washington. Doesn't matter your reason. That's prohibited. You may want to speak here. I bet those police officers are going to throw you out. Because there are time and place restrictions that we permit. But depending on the justice's viewpoint of what's most important in that constitutional framework, they may permit some things and not others. And so that perspective obviously gets informed by our life experiences. Our decisions are based on sometimes common sense. And that's not a bad thing, as long as you realize that common sense is what you know. Because sometimes what you know is different than reality. So I have a favorite story. A few years back, we had a case involving searches of cell phones. And one of my colleagues looked at one of the lawyers and said, basically, who besides a drug dealer has 2 phones? I turned to the colleague sitting next to me and said, I do. So does the lawyer in front of him. Because every government lawyer today has 2 phones. They tell you in big writing, every time you turn on the screen, don't use this for personal purposes. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, you shouldn't use your phone for unlawful purposes, your personal business. If a company gives you a phone, don't be so stupid as to do your personal business on the company phone. Most companies reserve the right to search your phone for no reason at all. So everybody should have 2 phones if their company is supplying a phone. Now, did the judge rule in that case because of his lack of knowledge on that point? I doubt it. That's why we have 8 other justices in our conversations to correct some of our misimpressions and to bring a different life experience into the conversation. You know, many, many years ago, I remember a case where one of my colleagues on the Second Circuit, on a case involving forfeiture of cars, basically said to the lawyer, who in New York City needs a car? You can take the train or the bus, or you can walk. And I sort of, from my corner of the room, said, gypsy cab drivers make a living driving their cars. And people don't only work in New York, they work in places that don't have nearby public transportation. Again, did that make a difference? I don't know, because in the end, that justice was ruling on a whole list of different things, but he didn't rule based on a misperception that cars are unnecessary for people in New York City. So I am proud of being a Latina. It has given me an enjoyment of life that is so full, that spark that was discussed at the beginning. I tell people I'm the proudest American you can imagine. I tout our Constitution, our laws, our system of government, even when I'm unhappy with them. I think it's among the best in the world. But I have a Latina heart, and that Latina heart gives me an appreciation of the richness of family, of friendships, of our food, of our music, of our poetry, that have enriched my understanding of the greater society that I'm living in. Not greater, but the bigger society that I'm living in. And so, yes, it influences you, but not in ways you can quantify, and not in ways that I can tell you in any one decision, my being a Latina is what made the difference.
Thank you. So the next question is from Melissa Cairo, class of 18. Yeah.
Hi. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
I'm a senior.
Thank you. I don't know these years.
My question is, if you were graduating law school today, is there a specific job or industry that you would pursue? And do you think that law school potentially has lost some of its value based on, since the cost of the education has increased so much and many industries no longer require the degree?
Okay. Let's come and take a picture. I'll give you an answer to your second question first. I love the law. I went into it because I had a passion about what law can do for people and does for people. For me, the law was the best way I could engage in helping people in their relationships with one another. And when I use the word people, I don't mean just natural people. I'm using it in the corporate sense too, or the government sense. People go to lawyers because they want lawyers to help them with their relationships. Whether it's two people fighting about a car accident, or an employee fighting with their employer, or a person fighting with the government, or the government charging a person with something, or two companies fighting about their respective rights to a product. Every single legal issue involves a human relationship. And in every one of them, a lawyer is involved in trying to help those people improve that relationship. Seems an odd thing to say, right? You go into the courtroom, you're going to have a winner or a loser. And so how are you helping? Well, you're resolving the dispute. You're giving clarity to a point of contention between them. And you're letting them move on in a way where they understand the parameters or the limits of what they can or can't do or demand. But most lawyers never end up in court. Most lawyers serve transactional roles. That's why you have lawyers who are members of this university. They advise not just the president, but other faculty and even students on their legal rights in different situations. There are lawyers that are part of every corporation who do the same thing. There are lawyers who work on your house closings. There are lawyers who work with you on your business deals. There are lawyers who work with you if you have a family dispute. So law is about service to people. You have to choose whether that kind of service makes you passionate. And if it does, pursuing a law degree is the best way to lead your life. I loved being a lawyer. I loved helping people in those ways. When I settled cases, I felt just as good as when I won them in court. Because in both situations, I did what was right, I thought, for the client. And so, go to law school if that's what you want to do. And cost, frankly, I'm going to use a 4-letter word, cost be damned. You know, you pay a mortgage for your home. You pay it for the rest of your life so you have a place to live. If you have to pay a mortgage on your education and pay for it for the rest of your life, you've kept the value of it with you the rest of your life. And so I do hope and I do think that colleges and law schools, the country is going to have to face the rising cost of education. But I don't think that should be the reason you don't do something you really want to do. That answers and swings back to the top of your first question. People will tell you, don't do this because it doesn't pay a lot of money. Don't be a teacher. You get lousy pay. That's probably true in most places, okay? But there is no more important profession in the world than teaching. And yes, you can stay a classroom teacher, but there are so many teachers I know who use their summers to make extra income and do things that can supplement their income. Teachers become administrators. Teachers become tutors. Teachers do other things to survive in a way that brings more quality of existence to them. And those good teachers who impact lives that last forever, kids who remember their first grade or second or third or fourth or fifth grade teacher for the rest of their lives, that's a legacy I would be proud to bear, even if I didn't make money. And so the answer is, find your passion first. Find what you do well. Find what makes you happy. Figure out what excites you. You want to be able to get up every morning and say, I want to go to work. I think the saddest people are the people who you see who wake up and say, I don't want to go to work. That's really sad. The people who you find in whatever job they're doing, who actually enjoy what they're doing, they bring such pleasure to the world. I tell kids all the time, go into a store, look around, and find the salesperson who smiles and laughs with you. That person, everybody's on a line waiting for them. They've given joy to every person they've met with that day. The surly, nasty salespeople, you meet them and you go, I'm not coming back to the store. The point is, it doesn't matter what you're doing. What matters is it bringing you satisfaction? So pick what does that for you, okay?
Thank you.
So which way am I going?
well, we're
We
looking,
took a picture, right? Yeah, okay.
Alexander Samaha, if I have the name right. Where's Alexander?
Yes.
Yes, fair.
Other side.
Hold on. I'm here. Tell me which way to turn. Left, right, back.
Back corner.
Okay, got it. Now I see him.
Hi. So my name is Alexander Samaha, and I'm studying history and Middle East studies. And my question for you is, what
Timely
changes...
topic.
Yes. What changes to the current legal system do you believe are most necessary in order to improve the civil rights of marginalized communities in this country?
You know, we talked about reducing the cost of education. We have to reduce the cost of legal services. We are the only country who purports to value family values, who does not provide legal representation for parents in custody disputes. It's one of the most important issues that face a family. And yet we don't require legal representation of parents in that situation. Some states do, most don't. Many states require a guardian representative for the child in the problem, but they don't provide any guidance for the parents. We still have service for criminal defendants, but we have many proceedings where criminal defendants are not given representation, even though the consequences are punitive. So example, civil forfeiture of items that have been seized during a criminal proceeding. In some instances, they are adjudicated within the criminal proceeding, and then you have a lawyer. Many others, they're not, and you don't have a lawyer. You have to read the transcripts that I read of legal representation across the country in criminal cases. There are some fine defenders, public defenders out there. There are some states where it's abysmal representation. You know, a capital case, someone's been sentenced to death with a lawyer who's never tried a case in his or her life. And we permit it. And so that sort of thing, we still need to ensure that the outcome of your case in court is not dependent on the quality of the lawyer you have. And regrettably, it can be. The lawyer who's not careful, the lawyer who really doesn't have a sense of integrity about doing all the research necessary to get a case right, happens all the time. And that just puts a sword in my heart. And it should put one in yours too, and in everyone's in this room. To be able to say that we have equal justice for all, we're going to have to find a way to equalize the resources that we provide to defend people's rights. And so that's, frankly, not just for poor, it's for rich too. Seems odd to say, isn't it? But a system that breaks down, as it has in many countries, means that everyone starts disrespecting the system, and everyone is affected negatively. So I would start in all those ways. We have overcrowded prisons with really inhumane situations. There's a case that happened probably about 5 years ago where the court required California to do something about its overcrowding. We have pictures attached to the court's decision where prisoners are in a cell, whatever the size of the cell is, stacked up like you stack up coffins, one on top of the other to the ceiling, with clogged toilets that are backing up into the cell. Well, we increased costs because these prisoners were getting sick at an incredible rate, and feeding and clothing them and housing them was dangerous. But we have to do something about all these things. And I think the country has forgotten that it has to invest resources in taking care of its needy, not just in criminal, but in civil law as well.
Thank you.
Next question?
So Tara Srinivas, where's Tara? Ah.
All right. So my question, I'm Tara. I'm the sophomore studying neuroscience. And my question is, in your opinion, what are the top 2 challenges that young women face today? And how would you advise them to prepare for these challenges?
They haven't changed. Challenges have remained the same from when I was growing up to when you're growing up. For those young women in the audience, because you have a woman president, a woman dean of the college, you are 54% of the school, you don't figure there's gender discrimination, right? You don't generally feel it, okay? Not in your life up to now. The reality, however, is that the larger society, that's not necessarily true. And if you look at the statistics, women doing the same work still earn less than men. You can't fight the facts. The measures have been studied over and over and over again, and pay equality is still one of the biggest issues our nation faces. So that will occur in your life. Look at most other industries. I take education out of it, okay? But perhaps not completely. I think your president might be able to tell me whether women presidents are the norm yet in higher education.
No.
Probably not. There's a lot more of them in law school, as law school deans, but they're still not predominant there. Go to law firms. There's a lot more partners than when I started. When I started, firms of 300 and 400 had 1 or 2 female partners, and they were touting how progressive they were. What a joke, right? The statistics are better, but it's not compared to the proportion of women in the profession. They told me that over time, we would reach equality. I started in 1979, and there's still only 1/3 women as federal judges. And we're a lot of women in the profession. So what's happening? We still have to fight gender inequality. It still exists. It exists in people's stereotypes, in how they view women compared to men. One day in the DA's office, one of my supervisors had a woman prosecutor come into his office in tears over something. And his response was, "Please don't do that. Go in the bathroom and throw up the way men do." I don't know if he meant it as a joke, but it made the rounds of the office, okay? I do think that people evaluate successful people on their own self-models. So in the workplace, if your bosses are men, they're looking for clones of themselves. That's what they were successful, a clone of them will be successful. That's why in most situations, when you're looking at promotions, most of the promotions will be people who are similar to the people doing the promotions. And if they are men, that's what's going to happen. And there's ways of doing things that differ among men and women. And I often talk in my classes to women lawyers. and talk to them about how you have to be conscious of how you present yourself in the courtroom. You don't have to be loud if you speak softly, but you do have to train yourself to modulate your soft voice so it projects, because you need people to hear you. You also have to modulate your speech so that you keep people interested. These are things you have to do with whatever skill set you have or don't have. It's your responsibility to recognize that people in a courtroom who are like me, a bit assertive, a showboater, like men, that we do better. That's why one of my law school friends said, "You argue like a man, Sonia." Go to your next class. See how much of this is still true today. It was certainly true when I was in school. Teacher would call on a guy and he would say, "No, this is this way. No, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't this make sense instead?" And a woman would raise her hand and say, "Professor, have you thought about this? Is this possible? Could this be another way of thinking about it?" It's cultural, the way we're taught to try to be less confrontational. And so all of those things are skill sets that we as women have to think about and alter where it's appropriate. Doesn't mean all the time, but you have to know when to get up and be loud and when to get up and speak softly. The impact is different. You have to be conscious. So, the two greatest obstacles that you have to confront: gender discrimination still exists. Secondly, we have to take the lead in changing it. Good luck.
So, I have one more question. I think we have time for two more questions.
Great, go ahead.
And Patricia Rodarte, where is she? And then followed by the last question, aptly named, a student named Patience.
I like that.
Boyega. We can't miss Patience.
Yeah, no, we can't
But
do
we'll
that.
start with Patricia.
Hi.
Hello, Patricia.
Hello. My name is Patricia Rodarte. I'm from El Paso, Texas, which is a city on the U.S.-Mexico borderland.
I just missed it. I was in Corpus Christi.
Oh, man. Well, it's actually opposite side of the state, but...
That's why I missed it.
So I am the daughter of two hardworking Hispanic parents, neither of who attended college. And coming to Brown presented a challenge of constantly catching up with my peers, not only in academics, but also in enriching personal experiences and cultural capita, which is something that you discuss in your book. So my question is, what words of encouragement would you now give us students who are either low income, first generation, or minority students whose sense of belonging is often questioned or attributed to affirmative action?
Patricia, I'm arrogant. I really am. I try to be humble, but there's nothing more that can upset me than for somebody to say that I'm in a place because of affirmative action. And when I look at them, I say, probably. But I've done more than you have. I've come further than you have. I am more deserving than you. You were privileged to have an extraordinary education. You were privileged to have parents who knew how to train you and guide you to get to where you are. My parents couldn't because they never had it. I didn't start out with that guidance, but look it, I'm here too. I came further than you did. And every day I do more than you do to earn being here. Because I study hard, I work hard, I'm struggling every day to catch up. And maybe I won't catch up completely. Maybe I'll have to spend the rest of my life catching up. But in the end, what I've done is more valuable because I've worked harder than you have and will have gone as far as you did. So that's the first thing that I think all of us who are labeled as affirmative action babies, and I carry it with pride, I look at people and say, yeah, but I've earned it. So there's where you have to start. Second, institutions don't change unless the people in them change them. You know, when I first got to Princeton, it was the third year of women at Princeton. We were only about 15% of the class. The two classes before the first class had 50 women, the second class had less than 10%, mine 15%. By the time I graduated, it got up to about 30. I had a lot of classes with no women. The newspaper, the student newspaper, was filled with alumni decrying how women were reducing the prestige of Princeton. Today, Princeton's had a woman president. Princeton's had, and currently has, their chairperson of the board is a woman. Half their board are women. We give a lot of money. It took decades for women to belong to Princeton. I went to Yale, and there was no picture of any women on the walls of Yale. All the portraits were of men. This was 1979. Last April, they hung my portrait. And they put it on the wall of the biggest classroom. And I said in my acceptance speech that it is my hope that other generations of Latina and women and others who have felt not a part of this institution will look at that portrait and say, yes, I belong here too. You will belong. You are belonging.
So we have a final question. Patience Adegboyega. Where's Patience?
Patience? Paciencia, ¿dónde está? Oh, she just left. Well, I'm sorry. She must have had a class.
She must have had a class?
Yeah.
Okay. So come on up. I think we're done.
I think
then.
I finished with all
of
you.
Yeah. So before we conclude, let's give a round of applause to the students who asked questions. They were terrific. And I want to thank you on behalf of the entire Brown community. Having you here has been a gift to all of us. I think someone's supposed to bring out a gift for you. So, yeah. Thank you. And this makes up for your not having stopped by Providence on the way to Harvard.
If I get cold on the train home, I'm wearing it.
Well, again, a round of applause for the Justice. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are so terrific. They love you. And yeah, they're amazing kids. So, absolutely. What? Do you want to talk about something? Yeah. Okay. So we have one more thing that the Justice would like to speak about. Go ahead.
I'm involved in a lot of things. You asked me earlier how I do it. I don't sleep. I have recently stepped up to sit on the board of iCivics.org. It is an organization started by Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman justice on the Supreme Court after she retired. She has stepped back from active work, and they asked me to join the board. iCivics teaches civic education to middle schoolers by playing games. It has 19 games, and it teaches various parts of American civic life. So, the first game that has been translated into Spanish now is called Do I Have a Right? And it goes through the 10 amendments and teaches kids what they mean. There's One Immigrant Nation. We're trying to get that translated now. They're working on getting the funding for that. There's another one, How to Win the White House. Had the biggest number of hits of any non-commercial game in the nation. Why do I do this? I do this because we spoke earlier. The most important job that anybody has is being a citizen. And I don't mean citizen in the formal sense of do you carry a passport. I mean citizen in the sense of being a participant in the community that you're involved in. And unless you undertake to make your community a better community, all you're doing is being a bystander in life. You're letting laws and bad things happen to you. Those of us who choose that will pay the price because the things we don't like will persist. Those of us who understand that our civic involvement, our willingness to speak out and to do, to change the world for a better place, that will make a difference. And so for me, middle school is about the age where you have to start teaching it, but you have to continue it throughout a person's education. And I encourage everyone in this room to go on to the iCivics game, iCivics.org. It takes an adult about 10 or 15 minutes to play a whole game, maybe less time. If you score 100%, you don't have to play the other games. I bet most of you will play all 19.
So again, please join me in a final round of applause. Thank you so much. Woo. Standing ovation. This is really great. Look at the Puerto Rican flags. Yeah.